Hi, it's Lee. We're moving on with our war game. In fact, this is the last part. You'll see here we have defined our variables, created a card with the for loop, shuffled our cards. We divided our cards into two piles, dealt them to the two players, wrote that on the screen, and then here we are at the draw function, and that's the last thing. This whole thing is what happens when you click on draw. So we probably won't do all that today. Let's see how far we can get. So draw, this is the draw button right there. So when you click on click, run this function. Okay, so anywhere in that rectangle, if we click on it. And this is something I'm pretty sure I probably had to go back and and add to empty what was there, because it's something you think of when you run it, and then they're like on top of each other or something. So you want to, I'm emptying the box. They start out empty, but then once I click on it, there's something there. So we're emptying the box, and then we're defining the number in the suit. Okay, so suit number 1 equals first player 0, 0. So remember, our cards are an array with little arrays inside. So the first card, you know, is like something like that, let's say. And then the next card is, well, they're shuffled, so they're not all in order. 3. So here is the first item in the array. Here's the second item in the array. Okay, so this is looking in the first player array. Remember, we made the cards and then divided them in half, and each player has its own array, its own pile of cards. So the first player, this is the first card and the first item in the first card. First card, first item, and first card. So that's 1. So this player has an ace. Okay, so second player, they look at the first card and the first item in that. This player has a 4. And then for the suit, they're looking at 1. So it's 0, 1. So it's looking at the first thing. This time it's looking at the second number. So, you know, hearts or whatever. Or if this was the second player's array, and then it would look at, you know, it's the first thing in the array, it would look at this. This is the number 1 index, so it would be clubs. Okay, so we're just looking at the first card. The 0 means we're looking at the first card in their pile. The 0 means we're looking at the first part of that card, which is the number, and then the 1 is the second part of that card, which is the suit. And so we're defining this as number 1 and number 2, and suit 1 and suit 2. And so we're going to write the number there on the card. First player number, there's a spot in the HTML. So there's a first player card, and there's a first player number where we write the number, and then a first player suit where we write the suit. So those are like specific locations. So in that number area, we're going to write number 1. Second, we're going to the HTML, we're going to write number 2. So for the suit, at first I was just going to write the word in there just to get started, which you could do just to get started to get your function going. But then I decided to go ahead just to try out adding pictures. So I changed 1 into a picture. Now we're going to have to do something like this for, I haven't done anything with jack, queens, and kings. We'll have to do something like if it's 13, then it's really a king. So here I do something like that now. So if suit 1 equals 1, so if the first player's suit is 1, then suit 1 really equals this image. So it's the whole HTML here. Image source equals quotation marks, and the address of where you find that picture. I used public domain images, right? Be careful of stuff like that online. Pixabay is a good place for photograph. I use something called clicker.com. It doesn't have the I in there, or C, I think it's CLKER or something. That has tons of images, like these things, drawings, that are just free to use. So if the suit 1 equals 2, then I'm calling 2 diamonds, so suit 1 equals this picture of diamonds. So it's this whole HTML. And then once I did all 4 of those, I just copied and pasted it and changed all the 1s to 2 to define the same things for suit 2. Okay, so now here, and I'm not just writing, it doesn't say, I don't, like for the number, I just said, write to the HTML that one number, right? Nice and simple. To make it a little more like a card, a regular card, I wanted a whole bunch of hearts, 3 hearts if it was a 3, instead of just a picture of a heart, which you could do. You could have it any way you like. But to do that, I used a for loop. So we start at 0, and I is less than number 1. Okay, so because it's 0, that'll give us the right number. So if our number is 3, it'll start at 0. So it'll do it for 0, it'll do it for 1, it'll do it for 2. So then once it's 3, then it's not less than 3 anymore. So it'll stop. So it did 3 times for 0, 1, and 2. That's 3 times for the number 3. So just a simple loop through there, and instead of HTML, we're appending, we're tagging it on to what's there. If I wrote HTML there, it would just be on top of what was there before, and it would just look like one thing. Let's look at that. There's just one here. It drew that picture 9 times. It put the picture on there 9 times, but it just put it on top of each other. If we append, then it tags it on to what's already there. So same thing for number 2. Again, that was 13, so that would be a king. Like, we'll have to work something else out for that. But I decided to stop where I was and just had the good basic function down, and then go back to fancy it up as much as I want. That extra thing there. So let me just do this next little part, and then we'll stop. We talked about push and splice, so here's another little review. So we have an array. We have arrays called played cards. Right now it's just empty. Before we drew for the first time, we have played cards, and we have first player and second player. These are all arrays. Played cards, first player and second player. So we're pushing to play cards the 2 cards. First player's first card goes to the played cards pile, the array, and the second player's first card gets put in the played cards pile. Okay? And then we're going to remove those cards from the pile, right? You took it, just imagine them playing. Like, you take it out of your pile, you put it down in the middle. Okay, that's your played cards area. So it's not in your pile anymore. So we're going to take it off these arrays, right? It's off the top of your pile, it's gone. This is to start at the top of your pile, start at 0, the first thing in your list, and take off one thing. Now remember, an array looks like this. So when we're taking off the first thing, this whole thing is the first thing in the list. So you're taking off the number and the suit. They're going together. The whole card goes when we splice it off. All right, and then the next lesson we'll finish off. We will look at, we're going to say who wins, right? And then I can just tell you real quick now, if number 1 is greater than number 2, that's simple, right? We define those as the numbers on the cards. Then player 1 wins. All right, and then what we're going to do is take the played cards and push them to the first player. Console log, remember this isn't really code, that just leaves you a little note. When I was first doing the code, I leave myself lots of little notes to make sure the different parts of the function are running. I can check the console log. Check on the console. Okay. So do you understand that? Like you pick up all the played cards and put them at the bottom of your pile. So we're pushing them to whoever won. And this is just the same code here. If else. Did we learn if else? We did do else back a while ago, so this is another review. Now I'm letting the lesson get long, sorry. So if number 1 wins, then we write player 1 wins, and we put the cards into the first players, the cards that were played, we put them in the first player's pile. That's all this is. Else, then player 2 wins. There's only 2 choices. So if number 1's bigger, player 1 wins. Otherwise, you're going to do the same thing for player 2. And then we empty out the played cards. Just an empty array again. There's nothing on the playing table there. We emptied it out. And we write to the screen how many cards are in each person's pile. So that's what's happening. Excuse me. That's what's happening here. We draw, it writes on the numbers, it appends the pictures, and it announces who wins. And now the first player has more cards, right? They got one more card than they had before. Oh, it's back even again because the second player won. So we got up, second player now has 32 cards, the first player has 20 cards. So that's the basic function of the game right there. We'll see next time what we decide to do to fancy it up, finish it off, and you're doing a great job. So there's a lot of review, lots of things that we've done before, but apply them in different ways. So work through those in the code and write yourself notes about what's going on. Make sure you know what's going on in each place. Why do we empty this here? Because we just push the next, like if this was, let's say, the Ace of Hearts and the Ace of Spades that were played in the played cards piles, then they get pushed to the winner. If we don't empty it out, next time there'd be 4 cards in the played cards pile. It'd be Ace of Hearts and Ace of Spades, and then the 2 of Clubs and the Jack of Diamonds, whatever. Would just get longer and longer and longer, and there'd be duplicates of the same card. We have to make sure we empty out the played cards. So just think about the game, think of what's actually happening, and that needs to be reflected in your code somewhere. Okay, I'll leave you alone. Great job. See if you can get your game working.